Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this side event of the Global Forum for Food and Agriculture. Welcome to our distinguished panelists. Welcome to all of you who are following us online. This session will focus on trade and more specifically on the issues which have been addressed in the communique adopted by the ministers during the last Ministers of Agriculture meeting in 2020. My name is Jean-Marie Pogam. I'm Deputy DG of the WTO, and I have the pleasure to be moderating this session. Let me start by just providing you some background and context. As some of you may recall, the 2020 edition of the GFFA had looked at the role of trade in food security and how to make it work for a, quote, secure, diverse, and sustainable nutrition. In the communique, the ministers have addressed 4 blocks of important questions by looking at the role of trade in food security, innovation and technology and how to put them at the service of agricultural development, the notion of inclusivity, very important, and safety aspects of food value chains, and also, last but not least, trade rules and how to enhance trade rules for the benefits of all. Ministers had made some commitments in the communique and undertook to review the progress made and the evolution since this communique at the present GFFA this year of 2022. So a lot has happened, not least the COVID pandemic, which has been, of course, the unexpected major development in the world economy and in the planet. So today we have an opportunity to check on what has happened since 2020, the role that trade has played in food security, if the pandemic has been a complete game changer vis-a-vis what was expected during the last communique. And so our panel today will take a deeper look at how international trade has contributed to safeguarding food security, the role of technology sharing in agricultural development, the inclusivity in value chains, and the key building blocks of a fair international regulatory system for agricultural trade. So please let me briefly introduce our distinguished panelists before we enter completely this session. We have the pleasure of welcoming EU Commissioner for Agriculture, Commissioner Wojciechowski. Commissioner Wojciechowski has been a long-time member of the European Parliament, also the Polish Parliament, and he started his career as a magistrate and has been holding very senior responsibility, in particular the presidency of the Polish Supreme Audit Office. We also have Minister of Agriculture of Zambia, the Honorable Ruben Tolofiri. Mr. Tolofiri is an economist by training. He has massive experience in the agricultural sector, and before joining government, he has been several years a member of parliament for the Chipata Central Constituency of Eastern Province. We finally have Mr. Paul Sampson, Associate Deputy Minister for Agriculture for Canada. Mr. Sampson has also served as Assistant Deputy Minister in several capacities, including in the Ministry of Finance, Finance and Global Affairs in Canada. And at the beginning of his career, Mr. Sampson also worked in several think tanks and university with a lot of focus on environment and agricultural issues. So this is our team, and we are going to discuss all the menus that I previously referred to. But before that, I'd like to introduce and give the floor to Mrs. Ophelia Nick, who is Parliamentary State Secretary of the German Federal Ministry for Food and Agriculture, for a welcome address. Mrs. Nick, you have the floor.
Sehr geehrter stellvertretender Generaldirektor Pogam, sehr geehrte Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren. Ich freue mich sehr, Sie heute, auch im Namen unseres Bundesministers Özdemir, zu dem Side-Event Handel im Rahmen des 14. Global Forum for Food and Agriculture zu begrüßen. Mein Name ist Ophelia Nick und ich bin seit Dezember des vergangenen Jahres parlamentarische Staatssekretärin. Die Frage, wie wir eine wachsende Weltbevölkerung vor dem Hintergrund der Klimakrise, aber auch solch krisenhaften Geschehnissen wie der Corona-Pandemie angemessen ernähren können, ist eines meiner Herzensthemen. Ich begrüße es deshalb sehr, dass Sie mit der heutigen Veranstaltung einen Blick zurückrichten. Vor 2 Jahren, im Januar 2020, stand das GFFA unter dem Motto Nahrung für alle, Handel für eine sichere, vielfältige und nachhaltige Ernährung. Wie wichtig und zugleich gefährdet internationale Lieferketten in den darauffolgenden Monaten infolge der Corona-Pandemie werden würden, ahnten die meisten von uns damals noch nicht. Heute sind Fragen des internationalen Handels aktueller denn je. Bundesminister Özdemir hat sich erst in der vergangenen Woche auf dem Agrarrat zu handelsbezogenen Agrarfragen geäußert. Dabei hat er die enge Verbindung zwischen Landwirtschaftspolitik und Handelspolitik betont. Beide Politikfelder müssen kohärent gestaltet werden, gerade im Hinblick auf eine nachhaltige Weiterentwicklung der Landwirtschaft. Die Europäische Union verfolgt deshalb ambitionierte Ziele. Mit der Farm-to-Fork-Strategie, mit der Biodiversitätsstrategie, mit dem Verordnungsentwurf zur Vermeidung von Entwaldung und Waldschädigung bei bestimmten Agrarrohstoffen. Wir als neue Bundesregierung begrüßen diese Ziele, weil sie wichtige, konkrete Veränderungen anstoßen können. Wir wollen Klima und Artenvielfalt besser schützen. Das gilt bei uns in Europa, aber natürlich auch im Rest der Welt. Sonst sind wir nicht glaubwürdig. Wir wissen aber auch, dass es für die Umsetzung dieser Ziele auf internationaler Ebene einen intensiven Dialog brauchen wird. Und zu diesem Dialog leisten Sie heute einen wichtigen Beitrag. Unsere gemeinsamen Herausforderungen im Dreieck von Landwirtschaft, Ernährung und Klimawandel sind gewaltig. In dieser Situation brauchen wir starke, multilaterale Institutionen. Deshalb müssen wir uns gemeinsam dafür einsetzen, die Welthandelsorganisation wieder zu stärken und zugleich ihre Regeln im Bereich Nachhaltigkeit weiterzuentwickeln. Um den regelbasierten Freihandel auf Grundlage fairer, sozialer, ökologischer und menschenrechtlicher Standards zu stärken und um gemeinsam glaubwürdig unfairen Handelspraktiken und Protektionismus entgegenzutreten. Dazu gehört eine Erneuerung der Regeln zu marktverzerrenden Subventionen, die Aufhebung der Blockade beim Streitbeilegungsmechanismus, eine Ausrichtung am Pariser Klimavertrag und der globalen Nachhaltigkeitsziele der Vereinten Nationen. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, der internationale Handel ist unverzichtbar für die Welternährung. Er kann Menschen ernähren, auch in Regionen, in denen weniger wächst. Er kann für nachhaltige Entwicklung auch in ländlichen Regionen sorgen. Er kann einen weltweiten Ausgleich zwischen den Regionen mit unterschiedlichem Nahrungsangebot schaffen. Er kann Fluchtursachen bekämpfen. Dafür müssen wir aber beim Agrarhandel das Ziel des Rechts auf Nahrung und faire, ökologische und soziale Standards politisch ins Zentrum stellen. Ich bin deshalb sehr gespannt, zu welchen Schlussfolgerungen Sie in diesem Podium heute gelangen werden. Für die Organisation dieses Podiums danke ich Ihnen, sehr geehrter Herr Pogrom, ganz besonders. Der heutigen Veranstaltung wünsche ich viel Erfolg und eine erkenntnisreiche Diskussion.
Thank you very much, Madam State Secretary, and thank you in particular for a stimulating, inspiring, welcoming address in reminding us the key challenges of what you have called the triad, or the triangle of climate change, biodiversity, deforestation, and food and agricultural security. I think we'll have a lot to think about with this during our panel. Before entering into our session and turning to our panelists, I'd just like to mention to all the viewers that there will be an opportunity to ask questions after the first round of discussion with the panelists. There will be a chat box which will be opened as from 2 5:55 p.m. this afternoon, in a little bit less than 1 hour. If you would like to ask questions to the panelists, you will be asked to register, and you'll have, if you have not done so, of course, and then you may be able to ask a question you wish on the chat box. I'm now entering the substance of the session with the first topic on our agenda, which is the one I reminded us in my initial introduction, the link between global food security and trade. Ministers all agreed 2 years ago and all recognized that trade has a vital role to play for food security. We could now also add that the COVID pandemic has even made this relation more important. I would therefore like to ask our panelists from their different perspective on how, in your opinion, has international agricultural trade contributed to safeguarding food security, and what also could be done to harness the benefits of trade for the same purpose. I was thinking that, Commissioner, I may ask you first to start to jump into the water with this question, since food security is maybe at the heart of the European Union endeavor historically. And then we'll follow with Minister Phiri from Gambia, if you agree with that. Commissioner, you have the floor if you like.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real privilege and honor to participate in this panel exchange on the fundamental issue of food security and reflect on how the international trade system could contribute to safeguarding fair and sustainable food systems. From 1995, when the WTO agreement on agriculture came into effect until 2020, global food trade has doubled to $1.5 trillion. No doubt that international trade contributes to economic development through creation of jobs, boosting income growth and productivity, agro-food global value chain. Trade can improve food availability where it is scarce, and can also improve access to food by creating jobs and raising incomes. A more predictable trading system can also improve stability, another key component of food security. Countries with higher levels of participation in global value chains have experienced stronger sector and employment growth as a result of access to more efficient and higher quality inputs. They have also been able to reap productivity gains from new technologies and wider innovations. World leaders have acknowledged the importance of trade for improving food security and nutrition in the commitments they made under Agenda 2030, and in particular, Sustainable Development Goal 2 under SDG 2B, leaders committed to correct and prevent trade restrictions and distortions in world agricultural markets. However, for trade to improve food security to the greatest number of people across the globe, effective rules-based multilateralism and greater international cooperation is necessary. The international agricultural trading system needs to become more sustainable, less distorted, as well as take the specific needs of developing countries into account. The COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged every continent, taken millions of lives globally, and put unprecedented strain on our economies. However, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, food insecurity was already on the rise, with up to 811 million people facing hunger in 2020. 2.4 billion people lack year-round access to adequate food, and more than 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. The main drivers for hunger and malnutrition continue to be conflicts, economic slowdowns and downturns, but also climate change. These crises are interrelated. Climate change accelerates the destruction of the natural world through droughts, flooding, and wildfires. Biodiversity loss and unsustainable use of nature are in turn key drivers of food insecurity. I believe that we now all have once in a generation opportunity to embrace a green transition towards sustainable agriculture, trade, and sustainable food systems. This is our collective road to recovery for the people and the planet. The European Union, being the world's largest exporter and third biggest importer of agri-food products, has a special role in promoting international commitments such as UN Sustainable Development Goals. In 2020, the European Commission presented its Green Deal to address climate change and to reach its climate targets by 2030, and ensuring sustainable agriculture and sustainable food systems. It will put us on the right path to a sustainable future. The new common agricultural policy will help contribute to the Green Deal and strengthen the efforts of European farmers to tackle climate change and protect the environment. 40% of the CAP budget will be climate relevant. As a part of Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy will also enable the transition to a sustainable food system that safeguards food security and ensures access to healthy diets sourced from a healthy planet. The strategy sets concrete targets to transform the European Union food system by 2030. Let me enumerate some of them: reduction by 50% the use of and risk of pesticides, reduction by at least 20% the use of fertilizers, 50% reduction in sales of antimicrobials used for farmed animals and aquaculture, reaching 25% of agricultural land under organic farming, ensuring sustainable food chain, address food loss and waste. But obviously the objectives and the problem at stake are global issues and global threats, which cannot be approached by the EU alone. Challenges for all. We need to move forward together with our partners towards the green transition and sustainable agricultural trade. On its own, the EU can only achieve so much. If there is one lesson we have learned from the pandemic so far, is that we need to work together to boost efforts towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, notably objective number 2, zero hunger. We have to keep markets open, transparent and functioning, and promote sustainable production methods. Recognizing this, we are already liaising closely with our international partners and encourage the global community to find multilateral solutions in their quest for sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And it's true that the COVID pandemic was really a test about the international cooperation. I think it has given interesting results. I'd like to turn to Minister Tolofiri. Minister, how do you view the reaction of the system to the pandemic and the contribution of trade to the resilience of food security system during this period from our last minister meeting? Minister Tolofiri, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me observe, first of all, yourself, Director from WTO, Director Mari Pagwan. Let me also observe here, take cognizance of the Commissioner from the European Union, Commissioner Wachowski. Let me also observe the Honorable Dr. Paul Simon, Deputy Minister Agriculture and Agri-Food of Canada. It's nice to have you on the panel, Doctor. representatives and senior government officials who could be listening in, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me just say our protocols observed. Let me begin by thanking the Federal Ministry of the Food and Agriculture for Germany for inviting Zambia and also, for having successfully hosted the 14th Global Forum for Food and Agriculture. I'm actually very honored and feel privileged to be accorded this opportunity to participate to this very important dialogue organized as a follow-up on the previous GFFA 20, where food was the main discussion. We could be aware that more than 250 million people in Africa are undernourished as a result of hunger. This is despite the continent having huge land for agriculture production. In addition, the continent has 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. The continent still experiences low agricultural production and productivity. Further, conflict, adverse weather extremes resulting in floods, flash floods, dry spells, droughts, pests and diseases, and economic slowdowns and downturns have contributed to food insecurity. During the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the continent's food and nutrition security. Agriculture production has been impacted as a result of reduced farm labor, increased cost of agriculture inputs, and reduced incomes due to massive losses of employment. Further, government funding to the agriculture sector, in most cases, have been declining because more resources have been diverted towards the fight on COVID. So, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, international trade can play a very critical role in safeguarding our food and nutrition security. Africa remains a net importer of food from other continents. While this is appreciated, food trade within the continent is most ideal. Africa has a lot in common in terms of food, which is appreciated by all. The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area founded in 2018 can facilitate the movement of food across the continent from areas of surplus to those of deficit. To satisfy this agreement in food trade, Africa needs to increase agriculture production and productivity. There is need for the continent to translate political commitments on the African Union's Malabo Declaration on accelerated agricultural growth and transformation for shared prosperity and improved livelihoods into concrete actions at country and regional level. Zambia has prioritized agriculture, not only in terms of sustainable food and nutrition, but also for economic growth and job creation, especially among the youths, who, for example, in our country, account for about 40% of the population and are mostly unemployed. Zambia will enhance agricultural productivity through irrigation, mechanization, and farm block development. In addition, there is need to enhance and harmonize plant quarantine and phytosanitary systems and procedures to ensure smooth and safe trade. Zambia has learned a lot of valuable lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen the need to urgently diversify the agriculture from traditional production of cereals to fruit and vegetables, which are mostly imported. Realizing the dire effect that COVID-19 would bring, the country ensured that food trade was not adversely affected. Although movement of people were restricted across borders, Zambia ensured that trade, especially involving foodstuff, was given priority. All vessels carrying essential foodstuff from our trading partners were given fast-track clearance at our borders to ensure that the food supply chain is not affected. Further, government procured imported agricultural inputs in advance and ensured that they are delivered on time. Now, I couldn't agree more with the State Secretary, who actually emphasized the point that trade makes available food products that are not produced within given borders. Therefore, we cannot isolate trade in this case. It is an important aspect. So I think with those remarks, I tend to agree more sincerely that it is important that we facilitate trade, we ease trade if the world has to continue feeding even. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And I take note of the convergence that you have with the Commissioner on the role of trade for food security and agricultural productivity. I'd like to turn to Deputy Minister Sanson to give us his perspective on the same issue, particularly in the light of the COVID pandemic experience. Mr. Sanson.
Thank you, Monsieur Pogam, for your introduction, and honorable ministers from Zambia and the EU. I'd like to share Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau's warm greetings to you. She hopes to see you soon and in person, I might add. As was noted already, we agree that the pandemic has underlined the criticality of agricultural trade. Canada believes that overall predictability of agricultural trade is essential to safeguarding food security and to achieving sustainable food systems globally. Trade enables people to access foods and nutrition they need, as was just mentioned. Even in Canada, importing fresh fruits and vegetables during the winter allows Canadians to have nutritious choices all year round. And that's the case in many and even most countries around the world. Climate change will decrease global yields, and we can expect more disasters like floods or droughts. We had one of each of these in Canada over the past year, as did many other countries. Agriculture is absolutely fundamental to the international climate change response. Of course, the challenge is both to sequester and reduce greenhouse gas emissions while continuing to feed the world. So absolutely critical sector. Open and predictable agricultural trade increases competition in the marketplace and can contribute to lowering food prices. As we all know, global food prices have reached recent highs, and those pressures are likely to continue into the future. Canada joins many others in advocating that countries not adopt export controls or agricultural policies that distort trade and thereby impact food security. We would also stress the importance of science-based standards, Codex, the International Plant Protection Convention, the World Organization for Animal Health, support each country's food safety and therefore are key to keeping market accessibility open. The World Trade Organization Standards and Trade Development Facility will continue to be important in building developing countries' capacity to adopt and comply with agri-food standards. And Canada also advocates that international institutions like the FAO should increase their focus and support to countries on food trade. The minister from Zambia mentioned a moment ago phytosanitary being very important, and I'm glad he did that because we have noted a development during the pandemic has been the use of virtual documentation. And something has emerged in that space as an electronic sanitary or phytosanitary certificate. Those are the kinds of things that can facilitate trade, obviously in terms of more efficiency, but may open up new ways of doing things, although many systems still do require wet signatures on paper documents. My final point is to say that agricultural trade has helped to pull a lot of people around the world out of poverty, and it's essential as an engine of growth, as it is as adapting to climate change. Supporting science-based standards and approaches for food systems and avoiding policies that distort trade are critical steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I think you made your point pretty clear, and I think that with the three interventions, we have quite a great deal of convergence about at least two ideas that I'd like to underline. The first one is obviously that trade directly contribute to food security, first by providing access to food and lowering price, second by improving agricultural productivity, and the third point that you just made by linking also agricultural performance to sustainability. And the second important message that I take away is that we need an open, predictable, and science-based, transparent trading system to contribute to achieve those goals. So I think we have a strong basis with this first topic of the discussion, which leads us to the second one, which is about the role of technology and innovation in international trade and in the international trade and agricultural food security nexus. And to some extent, I think your point about the science-based system, Mr. Sampson, leads me to starting with you on this second topic, which I think is naturally linked. How important is technology sharing in agricultural development, and how can it be further enhanced in the future? Mr. Sampson, if you can have the floor again.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sharing technologies is fundamental. We would define those technologies as including, of course, equipment, materials, knowledge, best practices, and guidance, as I think most would. We feel that these do make an important difference in increasing agricultural productivity and development. I wanted to note a couple of examples that highlight this. Modernizing Agriculture in Ghana is a project that develops agriculture extension services, market research, inclusive climate smart educational training, and trade facilitation to develop strong food value chains. And we find that kind of thing is advancing these objectives. We've also placed an importance on inclusive economic empowerment. And an example there would be in Kenya, providing women with resources and access to training that they did not otherwise have. This has helped facilitate a number of partnerships with small entrepreneurs to access time and labor-saving technologies. We also support research institutions like the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, and discovering and adapting agricultural innovations has been a game changer in our own country and in many other countries, and that will continue to be the case into the future. So we do feel that continuing work on new innovations and technologies has a lot of promise. One thing that we've been looking at is more networking between researchers and farmers themselves to link research and application directly, as was the case in conservation tillage practices, which has been very successful. We have most recently experimented with something we call the Living Labs initiative, which is focused on agriculture climate solutions, significant investment to bring farmers, scientists, and other partners together directly to provide the latest discussions on beneficial management practices and apply those on farm in order to reduce the environmental footprint and enhance climate resiliency. We've also invested in Canadian Food Innovators Network, which is focusing more on the food organizations to try to drive innovation in that space as well. And we're keen to collaborate with other countries on that Canadian Food Innovators Network. We have also shared various techniques and discoveries around the world through the Global Soil Partnership, the International Network of Soil Information Institutions, and other bodies, which continue to play significant roles. Our experience has been that discovery is only half of the solution, maybe not even that. Sharing technologies is only successful when researchers and others work with the farmers, and that collaborations are built on trust. Farmers need to see how they can benefit from using a technology, ideally directly, creating opportunities to learn and support, and that's something that we would widely embrace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Minister Tolofiri, may I turn to you to provide the perspective from your country and more broadly from Africa, because you insisted a lot on the African integration as one answer to the food security challenge. On this technology sharing dimension, how do you view this question from your perspective? You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Really, the question is, how can technology sharing support agricultural development? We all know that technology plays a pivotal role in agricultural development as it contributes to increased agriculture productivity. And I must say that, for example, here in Zambia, this is one of the major problems we have, low productivity. So with the increasing population, amidst the challenges associated with climate change and COVID-19 pandemic, technology can greatly contribute to production and productivity. Technology in agriculture affects many areas, as we heard from the minister who just spoke, such as farming practices, fertilizers, pesticides, seed technology, among the many. So excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 pandemic affected the extension delivery in many countries, and it has restricted personnel contacts between our farmers and staff. Listening to the minister from Canada, he kept on talking about networking between research and the farmers. And I think it's a very important point to take home. But here we had this problem with this COVID, our extension delivery system literally just, can I say, collapsed. Some countries are using the information and communication technology in reaching to farmers, which can be shared with other countries. In the areas of seed, some countries have developed climate resilient crops. Others are using modern equipment and tools such as drones, remote sensors, satellites to provide information on temperature, rainfall, soil humidity, and so on, which can be shared among us ourselves, and that can make a huge difference in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, COVID-19 pandemic negatively impacted our farm labor too. To mitigate against this, modern mechanization, such as the use of combined harvesters, can reduce on manual labor and enhance farm production and productivity. African countries should therefore find workable mechanisms of sharing these labor-saving technologies in order to enhance the development of agriculture. And I think this cannot be restricted to Africa only. It should be worldwide. We need to share the technology because food is produced worldwide for the whole world. As it is, there's a lot of movement. We're just from talking about international trade. It's very linked to this. Realizing the impact brought about by climate change, Zambia has embraced climate-smart agriculture. The ministry and other cooperating partners are promoting conservation farming, which has proved to be sustainable to most of our small-scale farmers. Further, the ministry is scaling up the use of ICT in extension delivery mechanisms to the extent that it can, given our low technological standing in that area. So the country has embarked on the distribution of improved and resilient seed varieties and fertilizers to we have a program where we are dealing with more than 1 million small-scale farmers through a government subsidy program called the Farmer Input Support Program, commonly known as FISEP. So the key point really here, Commissioner, is Africa needs to embrace and share modern technologies to enhance production and productivity. I must hasten say that we just returned from Dubai, where we participated in the Expo 2020. And the whole idea, we went there to seek farmers who can come to produce in our country, to seek, collaboration with others so that we can benefit from the technology that we so much don't have. Zambia, as it is, like in most other African countries, we have huge, land which we would like to give up. And if we can bring other people coming in to farm with us, then we can benefit from the technology that other countries have. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very, very interesting point that you make, both of you, on the importance of the networks to make technology play its role. Commissioner, what is your reaction to this discussion on technology and food security? You have the floor.
Yeah, we must join efforts to reach the sustainable development goal and address the challenges of nutrition and food security by boosting technology, sharing, and innovation. Innovation is one of key enablers to achieve sustainable and resilient agri-food system. Research and innovation, investment, digitalization, and new technologies are at the heart of the European Farm to Fork strategy, as pivotal to accompany the transition towards a more sustainable food systems. Digital technologies have the potential to increase the sector sustainability and competitiveness. They can transform agriculture by helping farmers work more precisely, efficiently, and sustainably. The European Commission strongly believes that research and innovation can support farmers in striking the right balance between productivity, climate, and environmental goals. For instance, by using digital technologies, farmers can assess more efficiently production and environmental conditions, for example, through sensors and tailor applications, for example, of fertilizers or irrigation, reducing input and emissions. Agro-robotics can support the production process, for example, through weeding. The Commission is currently looking into new innovative techniques, including biotechnology and the development of bio-based products and the role they may play in increasing sustainability. For example, reducing of the use of pesticides, provided they are safe and consumers and the environment. At the global level, the European Union is already actively sharing experiences on innovation and the transfer of technologies. This is done in particular by strengthening research and innovation cooperation activities and networks and international initiatives. Beyond the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases, the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, Livestock Environmental Assessment and Performance Partnership, and the International Wheat Initiative, the European Union is also involved in the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate Change. Regarding Africa, it implements the EU-Africa Union Partnership on Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture. It supports the development of environment-friendly agricultural practices, promote local production, and integrate biodiversity concerns. This includes setting sanitary and phytosanitary standards and the protection of natural resources. European Union has also adopted geographic and thematic cooperation programs for the period 2021-2027 to address food and nutrition security and support the transition toward resilient and sustainable agri-food systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Here again, I think there are three great points of convergence that I'd like to take away. The first one is expected. By the way, it is a link between innovation, technology, and productivity, which you have been underlying. The second one is very interesting, is that you all underline the link between sustainability and technology innovation, including through the digitalization process. And the third one, I think is very important also, is you all emphasized the role of networks, farmers to researcher networks, research alliance. And this is something which, if I refer to Minister Tolo Fury, has been a little bit disrupted during the COVID due to the difficulties of human links and connection. So there might be something to catch up on after the crisis or very rapidly since now. So these are 3 points that I wanted to underline. And actually, this question of human links provides us a great lead to the third block of questions, which is about inclusiveness in value chains, how to make food value chains more inclusive, sustainable, and safe. And maybe, Minister Tolo Fury, I would suggest that you would take it on from this on this one first, if you agree.
Thank you very much, Director. So the question is, how can we make food value chains inclusive, sustainable, and safe? So for a long time, food production has been perceived as a sole responsibility of the ministries responsible for agriculture in many African countries. However, the 2021 United Nations Food System Summit reminded us of the need to have an integrated, sustainable, and safe food value chain. The development of agriculture needs the participation of all players across the value chain. An effective food value chain is not only about production, but inclusive of all processors, distributors, transporters, aggregators, and many others. In Zambia, the preparation for the Food System Summit embraced stakeholders from agriculture, health, infrastructure, transportation, trade, energy, and others. Further, the country has adopted an integrated approach in its national development plans through a cluster approach where all affected ministries have been grouped. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we produce food to feed the ever-increasing population, there is need to do so sustainably for future generations. Zambia is promoting climate-smart agriculture practices. In addition, the country has created the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment to ensure that natural resources are used prudently. So the take-home point here, the key point here is that inclusive food value chains should embrace stakeholders from agriculture, from health, from infrastructure, from transportation, trade, energy, plant quarantine and phytosanitary services, and many others to make the whole program, I think, sustainable and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. So not only an agricultural ministry matter, but a value chain of stakeholders that had to contribute to inclusiveness. Commissioner Wojciechowski, what would be your point on this question of safety and the inclusiveness of value chains?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Because now it's okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. There are not technical problems now. Thank you. As reflected in the European Green Deal, ensuring fair and sustainable food system in the European Union is the European Union's top priority. Progress will depend on global partners, on large emitters and polluters being ready to increase their level of ambition. Our resolve for the next decade is to ensure that value chains that are circular, responsible, and sustainable. This includes promoting responsible business conduct and respect of environmental, human rights, and labor standards. Making this vision a reality will require action at all levels, multilaterally, bilaterally, and autonomously. An improved multilateral framework is needed. The European Union will engage with like-minded countries to pursue a strong environmental agenda at the WTO. It will also promote deliberation in the WTO on how trade can support sustainable food systems, decent work, and social fairness. The European Union vast network of bilateral trade agreements can also facilitate and sustainable food systems. They offer a means to foster environmental standards in addition to food safety standards. For future trade agreements, the Commission will propose a chapter on sustainable food systems. The European Union will propose that the respect of the Paris Agreement be considered an essential element in future trade and investment agreements. In addition, the conclusion of trade and investment agreements with G20 countries should be based on a common ambition to achieve climate neutrality as soon as possible. European Union trade and investment agreements, as well as the generalized system of preferences, have also played an important role. This system removes import duties from products coming into the EU market from vulnerable developing countries, but it also promotes respect for core human and labor rights, as reflected in the UN conventions of the International Labour Organization, including action against child labor. The Commission will further reinforce the sustainability dimensions of existing and future agreements in the implementation of all chapters. It will strengthen the enforcement of trade and sustainable development commitments on the basis of complaints made to our Chief Trade Enforcement Officer. In addition, autonomous measures from the EU are supporting the objective to ensure that trade is sustainable, inclusive, and safe. The carbon border adjustment mechanism is a case in point. Another example is the Commission's legislative proposal addressing deforestation and forest degradation, or ensuring that supply chains are sustainable and responsible, with Commission's proposal on sustainable corporate governance, including mandatory environmental, human and labor rights due diligence, or our new global human rights sanctions regime to ensure compliance with human rights. Lastly, under certain circumstances, as defined by WTO rules, the European Union will require that imported products comply with certain production requirements. The legitimacy of applying production requirements to imports is based on the need to protect the global environment or to respond to ethical concerns. Whenever the European Union considers applying such measures to imported products, this will be done in full respect of WTO rules, notably the principle of non-discrimination and proportionality, aiming at avoiding unnecessary disruption of trade. The Commission will pioneer work on developing standards for sustainable growth and shape international standards in line with the European Green Deal, while engaging with its partners to develop and implement rules that are similarly ambitious. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner, for this very comprehensive answer. Deputy Minister Samson, you touched upon gender in your first response to Block 1. How do you view the question of inclusivity and safety in value chains, agricultural value chains? You have the floor.
Thank you, and I'll be brief, noting the time as well. So I'll say two things. First, on inclusivity, I think it is fundamental to all the goals. In this context of food systems, I think collaboration is critical in building the trust on the role of government in this space. And we launched a new food policy for Canada. First time we've ever done that 2 years ago. So since around the time we last met. And that has broadened out the conversation with the commitment that all people in Canada should be able to access a sufficient amount of safe, nutritious, and culturally diverse food. And that has helped the conversation around resiliency and innovation. I think we've included Indigenous food systems in that. We've included food loss and food waste. And so that is important. Gender is important as well. And you noted it, Chair, and internationally, Canada is very committed to that element as well under our feminist international assistance policy, and gender continues to be a critical part of inclusivity. On the sustainability question, also since 2020, we've launched a number of new initiatives. Again, one of them is linking directly to farmers, like not something indirect, but actually on-farm, a fund that we're calling the Agriculture Climate Solutions On-Farm Climate Action, which would take the best practices for storing and reducing carbon and incent those to accelerate. We've also launched a clean technologies program in the agriculture space in 2021. We feel that there's a lot that can be done there, and the uptake has been really quite fantastic. Just one or two other quick points. We do agree that more innovation is needed. We would join the chair of the UN Food Systems Summit scientific group and the remark that was made on genetic engineering, genome editing for proteins and advanced essential micronutrients should be pursued. We support improved food safety to combat new disease outbreaks and the development of antimicrobial resistance. We're moving towards a One Health approach. Building inclusive food systems requires collaborations with all stakeholders and trust, as I mentioned before, and innovations to leverage all the tools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. And as you rightly remind us, that time is running. I'll just take away 2 points on this block 3. The first one is very striking how convergent you are all in once again mentioning sustainability as being at the heart of including the inclusivity discussion. And second point is on process. It's a collaborative issue. It's not only an agricultural minister's issue, but an interagency process, as was reminded by Minister Tolo Firi, a private sector responsibility through corporate social responsibility, and responsibility for international partnerships. So I think we have a lot to think about on this issue. I'm moving now to our last block, bearing in mind that we are opening the chat for questions, so we'll have to be quite short on this. Of course, this is the role of rule, which is basically my favorite because this is the role of the WTO. You know that we'll have an opportunity with a forthcoming ministerial meeting, which has been postponed but should be rescheduled soon, to make a difference in the rule trading system. So my question would be very simple to you. You've been mentioning different aspects of rule, but what would be the key building blocks of a fair international regulatory system for agricultural trade? Maybe, Commissioner, you touched upon this issue of rules a lot, so I'd like to start with you again in touching this question. You have the floor, if you like.
Thank you very much. The European Union is a key supporter of the multilateral trading system. Developing the rules-based trading system is vital for global food security and development. The recommendations of key international organizations like the FAO, UNCTAD, OECD, amongst others, are vital if we are moved towards a global food system that provides health and well-being, respects the environment, and brings prosperity for all. We cannot be multilateralists without working together. The WTO has been of enormous benefit to its members since its establishment in 1995. It has provided a stable and predictable trading environment, allowing for a massive expansion of global trade for agriculture, whilst providing a framework for settling trade disputes through adjudication. However, it is now facing a crisis where it is failing to provide negotiating outcomes that deal with the challenges of global trade. Its ability to solve trade disputes is not working, and its system of monitoring needs to be improved to ensure transparency or prevent trade barriers. The Commission intends to pursue reform of the WTO across all of its functions. The WTO rules and practices must be updated and improved to reflect today's trade realities. This should be based on its membership, sharing a common sense of purpose, economic recovery and development, environmental and social sustainability. Modernizing the rules and improving the WTO's functioning, including through open plurilateral agreements, is critical in tackling competitive distortions and providing an agreed framework for sustainable trade. Restoring the dispute settlement system is, of course, crucial. We have to find a lasting solution to the current impasse surrounding the WTO system of binding disputes settlement. We have to make WTO monitoring of its members' trade policies more effective by increasing transparency, of members' trade practices and improving how the WTO committees work. The adoption by a large group of members of the WTO of the ministerial statement on trade and sustainability last December is a positive sign. It recognizes sustainable development and the protection and preservation of the environment as fundamental goals of the WTO, and acknowledges the role of international trade and trade policy in supporting environmental and climate objectives and promoting more sustainable consumption and production to help reach the SDGs. It also notes the importance of multilateral environmental agreements in furthering these goals. European Union priorities for a fair international regulatory system for agricultural trade for the 3 pillars of the agreement on agriculture. The EU has the following priorities: domestic support, reducing trade distortions measures is an important step towards a fairer agricultural trading system. The European Union has transformed its domestic support system, which now mostly comprises non-trade distorting measures. This has improved the functioning of the market for agricultural goods and trade. The European Union will continue to press for other members to do the same. Market access for agricultural products forms an integral part of the global trading system. Improvements in market access at the WTO could be achieved best by inclusive and comprehensive negotiations that encompass both agricultural and non-agricultural market access and services. Market access issues are also naturally at the heart of bilateral negotiations for free trade agreements. And export competition, the European Union believes that further negotiations should build on the steps taken in Nairobi, notably with regard to further disciplines and on export credits and export credits guarantees, international food aid, and agricultural export state trading enterprises. The world has changed. The role of agricultural trade has not. It is high time to act to make the system able to address the main global challenges: climate change and food security. WTO, fed with the insights from other international organizations dedicated to the development of the global food systems, is indispensable in ensuring open, fair, and rules-based agricultural trade. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Minister Turofiri, can you react on this issue of trade and what could be delivered by the system?
Let me start by saying I appreciate so much one statement that came from the Commissioner. He says the world has changed, but the role of agriculture has not changed. I think that's very fundamental. Director, a fair international regulatory system for agricultural trade should have a global inclusivity. It should take into consideration the breadth of infrastructural, institutional, and other relevant aspects obtaining from the least developed countries to the developed countries. This approach will enable fair international trade in agriculture and play a vital role in concerted and global fight against hunger. The principle of equivalency in the regulatory system plays a very important role in equalization of measures between the least developed countries and the developed countries. It is therefore imperative to not only have this principle on paper, but to practically apply it and reduce global hunger. The use of regional economic communities, RICs, is one fair way of championing global regulatory systems that work for everyone, and it should be embraced if international regulatory systems have to be inclusive and accepted globally. So far, the standard-setting bodies, as recognized by the World Trade Organization, namely the International Plant Protection Convention, IPPC, the World Organization for Animal Health, OIE, and the Codex Alimentarius, have been commendable work in standard setting. However, there still exists a gap in the implementation arrangements. The international regulatory system should therefore be designed to embrace and use the principle of equivalence in a manner that offers practical checks and balances to ensure that no trading partner treats another in an unfair manner by using instruments such as subsidies, quality and standards, economic status of nations, etc., etc. So the key point here, Director, is that the international regulatory system should therefore be designed to embrace and use the principle of equivalence in a manner that offers practical checks and balances to ensure that no trading partner treats another in an unfair manner. Thank you, Director.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I finally turn on this question to Deputy Minister Sampson to give us his point of view. You have the floor, Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. Put it very simply, the foundation is that agricultural trade should be regulated by science-based and rules-based approaches, not politics. It's obvious. But regulations should be supported by, therefore, internationally agreed standards for food safety, plant and animal health. And we further believe that international regulatory systems for agricultural trade should be designed to work for all countries. It's important. We also note that it is important that we are careful not to have agricultural trade policies that are designed to support the environment, but could have unintended consequences that can harm food security in other countries. We need to think that carefully through. Agricultural trade has been vital to fighting extreme poverty around the world. The DG of the WTO recently spoke to this point when she remarked that trade is part of the solution, not part of the problem. Canada supports this view. The building blocks for an international regulatory system for agricultural trade should include actions that reduce production distorting domestic support, particularly major subsidies. Canada remains an advocate for this work at the WTO. In addition, on transparency, we think that that can also be a priority to improve market information and increase the predictability of trade. Bodies like the Agricultural Market Information System have proven invaluable, and we will continue to advocate for further progress at the WTO to improve transparency. International standards for food safety, plant and animal health are essential to helping make food safer and more predictable. That predictability helps reduce prices and price volatility and supports transparency in agricultural markets. Any fair regulatory system should include investments and other supports so that all countries can build these capacities, access safe foods, and benefit from agricultural trade. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. And I think the key words are, of course, predictability in the sense of transparency, dispute settlement, science-based standards, and fairness in terms of non-trade distortive policies. These are what you insist on. I think it's highly time to move on to the question, which are already falling on the chat function. And without further ado, the floor being open, I'm going to pick up some with the first one, who is for the Honourable Mr. Tolofiri, and it's about the public stock holding of staple food reserves. The question is, how important is it to the food security status of African countries, so the public stockholding food staple reserves? Do many African countries actually have such stockholding schemes? And there is a follow-up question, which I think is also dedicated to you, Honorable Minister, which is about dual-purpose chicken. And I was myself investigating what was dual-purpose chicken during the chat. It is chicken who can be raised for both eggs and for meat. So maybe you'd like to take up those two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The first one, I'll practically use an example of Zambia. Most African countries, and especially, for example, here in Zambia, we do have an institution that is designed specifically to hold strategic reserves. And we call our company here, our entity here, which is a quasi-government institution, we call it a Food Reserve Agency. The major food crop that is held there is the food staple for Zambia, which is maize. You know, we grind our maize, make a powder, which we use to cook a certain like hard porridge, which is the major food staple for our country. You can use it also for preparing porridge. So it's a flour that you use from maize to prepare your what we call our shima. Now, what the agency does is to buy crop from farmers and keep. Now, it's given money by the treasury, it's given money by the state, and we keep this maize for use in times of need. The actual quantity is defined and was developed by the lead time that would need to import maize from outside the country to come into the country. And we noted that we would need food that is sufficient to cover 3 months. So the standard quantity that is kept by the Food Reserve Agency is a 3-month stock or a 3-month reserve. This is basically an insurance that when we have a problem, we can bring in crop, and during that period, we have sufficient food. So yes, most African countries have a reserve agency. It has gone beyond that, in that the reserve agency now, you find that we offer in most cases a better price. And what happens is that the farmers will want to supply maize to this agency, and in the process, sometimes we tend to buy more than we need, and therefore owe a bit of farmers here and there, but eventually pay. And instead of keeping that standard reserve, sometimes we keep a little bit more because of the push that comes from the farmers. So to answer the question is yes, most African countries have a strategic reserve institution, and specific in Zambia, we have one that has been running for a long time, and we keep on improving. The downside of this, of course, is that you are holding a lot of cash in stock. And for our countries which are, in need of cash for a number of developmental projects, you sometimes find that the agency is misunderstood by many, including some of the cooperating partners, as a drain on the national asset. And we are normally told you can do without this. We are not developed to have, to keep stock on options and, commodity exchanges. We keep physical stock, and that is the sad part of it. I didn't quite get the second question, so I might not be able to give you an answer right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We'll see if we have time to come back to the second question, which was about dual-purpose chicken, but it was a very specific one. Maybe I can turn now to one question which is addressed to you, Commissioner Wojciechowski. It's about the coherence of EU agricultural policy. And the question goes, the CAP continues to support increased agri-export, especially cereals, milk, or meat, which are worsening the poverty of farmers in Africa on the local market. So the question is there coherence between the CAP policy and the development policy of the EU? And can the EU finally change the unfair aspect of its trade policy to minimize those effects, especially in Africa? Would you like to pick up the question, Commissioner?
Thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you very much. That's This is important to mention that European Union the Common Agricultural Policy. This is not the policy which is not supporting increase of production, and also is not encouraging for the export of the agricultural products. Of course, we promote the European Union agricultural products, but now that we promote, first of all, sustainable agricultural products from the European Union. The European Green Deal will change a lot of the European agricultural system, that we'd like to reduce the intensiveness methods of the production. That first of all, we will promote the sustainable production, sustainable products. But I think that export of the EU food is very important for the global food security. And this is also important to mention that European Union is the biggest food exporter, but there is a big part of the European Union food export is based, significant part is based on the imported commodities, imported agri-products. And this is, I think, it is valuable for both sides. We also import the products which are processed and export as a processed food for the world. I think that thanks this cooperation, this cooperation is valuable for also not only for the European but also for our trade partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I take it from you that, of course, agri-food trade and value chains are two-way streets where imports feed also exports. We have a fourth question, which is dealing with the topic of inclusiveness. And the question is about how new innovating and technologies as well as global trade activities can improve the food security and livelihoods of the most vulnerable indigenous communities and poor smallholders in low and middle income countries. So it's really about how can we target the most vulnerable groups inside the different countries under the inclusiveness concern. There's one of our panelists would like to start with that one. I think it can be open to any one of you. Or should I designate a volunteer, like, for instance, Deputy Minister Adam, who dealt with that first in his first answer on when you presented to us some projects from the Canadian Aid Agency. Would you like to try to?
Sure.
On that?
Yes, thank you. I'd be happy to. Yeah, as I mentioned, agriculture has been a core part of Canada's development assistance approach for a long time now, recognizing the benefits for economic growth, certainly, in inclusion and empowerment. So no question that continues. In terms of reaching the most vulnerable populations, whether that's within countries or the least developed countries, I think the role of the multilateral organizations are very important there, to put together resources, not just bilateral assistance, but to get some larger transformative programs, and we're supportive of those as well. So I completely agree that this is probably the most important development equation for many of the most vulnerable and poorest populations, whether that be a subset within a particular country or a particularly poor country itself.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Would another panelist would like to add something on this question of inclusiveness on most vulnerable groups?
Yes, I could, I think, take it, and very appropriately so. If you look at, for example, statistics in Africa and specific in Zambia, you'll find that, like in our country, 2/3 of the farmers are absolutely disadvantaged, and they are incapable on their own of acquiring any form of technological advance. So it remains the responsibility of the government, like the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Green Economy, and the Minister of Livestock, to try and take technology to these farmers. For example, it will remain our responsibility as government to make sure that the seed we give the farmer has the right technological input in it. It will remain within the ministry to ensure that the country is mapped as to what type of fertilizers you can use. The farmer will have no clue whatsoever of what we are talking about here. It will remain the government's need to intervene in making sure that the farmers are guided on when to plant, or guided on exactly how much land they have. So it will be our extension services that will have to go, the extension staff that will have to go and ensure that the right things are, the right sizes are given to them. So in most times, the technology has to be packaged by us to the farmer. And it's the same. We actually have to go on food security packs, because the farmers, some of them are not part of the program where we are trying to build the farmer to a certain level where they can be sustaining even to buy a bag of fertilizer. So you find that there's this social protection program, and we give food security packs, which is like free fertilizer, free seed, sometimes actually basically free food and some, free money so that people can, sustain themselves. So the inclusiveness in terms of technology for African countries still remain a huge part with government. And where you have the private sector coming in to play the role, they are actually welcome. But you see, this is a social security program for the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. There are many questions on the chat. We have approximately 2 minutes to briefly try to take one last. The one I'd like to choose has to do with the interaction between trade agreements, regional trade agreements, and soil quality. And since soil quality and land use will be discussed in the ministerial meetings this week, I think it's an important topic to try to raise. So the question is, how can we prevent that regional trade agreements might be concluded at the expense of soil quality? Is there any inspiration to take up this one among our panelists? Commissioner Wojciechowski, maybe?
No, that's the trade agreements. This is very important. The trade agreements, to use the trade agreements as the opportunity to promote high production standards and to ensure the same trade, the same production standards between the partners of the trade agreements. This is very important. And what is the European Union intention that in the future trade agreements to promote the high level of the environmental standards and also the soil quality? This is very, very important for the future food security. This is our common interest to improve the soil quality, the protection of the soil for the future generation, including the trade agreements, and to require the same standards in the trade. But what is the problem now? That we have, this is also many times mentioned during the political debates in the European Union, that we have generally the same standard safety of food standards, safety of the products. Like in European Union, they are required the same safety standards for food which is produced in European Union and food which is imported. But not always we can ensure the same production standards, the standards for the soil, for the environmental, animal welfare, etc. This is the very important to common understanding that this is our common interest to improve the standards, to improve the production standards, and soil quality, protection of soil is one of them. It should be the very important part of our the disputes about the discussions, negotiations in the trade agreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Any other panelists would like to add something on this issue of soil quality? Minister, I see.
Yeah, maybe just to add, Director, it is important that there must be a good balance between regional trade agreements and quality, that indeed the regional agreements should not compromise the quality. But I think at the same time, it is important to note that we should not use the issues of quality, which are dynamic, in order to harm other countries that totally depend on agriculture. I think from the panelists, it was clear, and it has been mentioned over and over, especially from the honorable member from Canada, the minister from Canada. He kept on repeating to say agriculture can reduce poverty. I think that is an important statement. And therefore, we need to be very, very careful as much as we look at quality, that it should not be a quality that is not transparent, but quality that is used to reduce trade for specific areas. I think I just wanted to mention the fact that, this is one area where yourself, Director, from from the World Trade Organization, should be aware that it is one element that can be used really to bar imports or exports from given countries. And therein comes in, some form of politics in trade because of this issue of quality. Because you just have to change to say, no, we want this type of quality. And once that is given, say, no, we want this type of quality. And you find that a country can be harmed because of that. So I think we should use the issue of quality for the benefit of society, for the benefit of trade. And that issues of soil conservation, measures, etc., should be part and parcel of policies overall in the legal framework. Transparency, I think, and predictability is what I'm trying to emphasize here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. We are 1 minute away from concluding our panel, so I think it's time to wrap up. I'm not going to reiterate the little takeaways that I mention after each block discussion, each topical discussion, but I have a lot in my basket, and I will work with that and with the questions and answers to provide a small report to the ministers' conference on Friday, I think, with all the input from the panel. I'd like to thank each and everyone, of course, our distinguished panelists, Commissioner, Minister, Deputy Minister, for your very rich insight, and all of you who participated online with your questions for these very rich discussions. And I'll do my best to convey your messages to the Global Food and Agricultural Forum this week. With that, if nothing to add from anyone, I will just call it a day and close the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.